Hello everyone. I just finished a sketchbook and I thought I would take this opportunity to show everyone my setup. I mean, I've had several people ask me, and they say, what sort of setup do you have in terms of your magic markers? What do you bring? Some people even ask if I have a watercolor set that I'm doing my illustrations in my sketchbook with. So I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to show you. First, one of the bags I found that is very successful for me has been this type of bag. Now, it's a messenger bag more so than it is just your typical horizontal bag. So this bag is more vertical, and I find that it holds sketchbooks a lot better. So if you're looking for a bag, you might want to look into something like this. Let's go and take a look. Well, first things first, I'd like to go ahead and show you the setup I have with my markers. First, you can see that I've got a lot of markers. But I also have gotten myself a bag that is clear, and I think this is important. I mean, you could do this obviously with a Ziploc bag, and for years I carried a Ziploc bag. This just made it a lot easier because the zipper on a Ziploc bag wouldn't last very long. But in this case, you can see that my markers are easy to get to because I simply take my bag and I can flip it around and take a look at the sort of markers or the color that I'm looking for. Now, the type of markers that I have, people ask me if I have Copic or if I have Prismacolor, what is the marker that I use? And I'm not really specific to any one type of marker. A marker that I've had for a while and I really enjoy using is the Tria marker, but this marker is no longer made, unfortunately. The company sold and they changed the formula for that particular marker. And the reason I like this marker was a very sort of ingenious design. It was a chisel point on one side, and then on the other side it had a fine marker, and then it had a super fine tip. That's why they called it a Tria marker. So it had 3 tips on one marker. I really enjoyed that marker, but one of the features I loved the best was the fact that it had refillable bottles that went along with it. Another marker that I've been using for years is the Prismacolor marker. Now, Prismacolor obviously has changed quite a bit since I first started using that particular marker, but the interesting thing is that the markers that I have in here is almost like a collection, like a historical collection to some extent. I've got this particular marker here, you can see, and I had to label it orange because over the years it's simply gotten scuffed, but amazingly it's got a pretty tight seal and the ink doesn't dry out, and I've had this marker probably going on maybe 15 to 20 years. It's been in my bag or being carried along with me. So this is actually the same brand of marker, it's just a different generation of marker. Prismacolor also has another interesting feature for their markers. Let me start. Just one of the things I do is that when I'm going to work, I just take all the markers and I start spreading them out on the table as I start using them. So I know that the markers that I'm using are the markers that are, the ones that are going to be most important to me because I'm going to be working off that particular palette. Whereas some of the other markers that I'm not going to be getting to, I simply don't worry about and I leave them in the bag. The other Prismacolor marker is this one here, and this one is actually, it's pretty dandy. It's got the same sort of small fine point that you can find in the Prismacolor marker, and it has a brush tip at the end. Unfortunately, whereas this one is good for working brush sort of technique, it's not really good for covering a large area. So the brush has its advantages and disadvantages. So I wouldn't say that I would choose a chisel point over a fine point. I think or let's say a chisel point over a brush point like this one. But I would have to say that put in a pinch, I would probably choose a chisel point. I think a chisel point is a lot more variety for me. There's also the Copic marker, which is sort of like the best of both worlds. So on one side it has a brush point, and on the other side it has a chisel point. Now this is very, very good in that regard, that you can cover broad areas, you can cover fine areas with the brush point. So it allows you to do the things that you need to do and helps you cover large areas and get a very fine point. So I think this is a terrific marker. Unfortunately, they don't have the colors. I've been trying to search for the right colors, and although they have a tremendous array of colors, you know, sometimes we get very specific about what it is that we're looking for, and haven't been able to find that with Copic. So you can see it's sort of a, for lack of a better word, it's a mixed bag, a bunch of different markers that I think work well with what it is I need to do. I also have, this one here, I don't know if I showed this one. This one has a fine point. It's also a Prisma. Has a broad chisel on this side, and it has a fine point on the other. These are good. Unfortunately, the little fine point has a tendency to dry out, and it simply just becomes a chisel point marker at that point. Some of the other tactics, the other things that I use in my bag. I found that using a color pencil is both good and bad. And is that when you're using graphite simply can get picked up, but has a tendency to muddy the colors. Whereas using a color, the color simply gets absorbed and it melts when you're drawing. It melts into the drawing paper, which is very good if you're using something like this that can easily be turned into a flesh tone. But if you're using a blue pencil or something like that, it's not going to work very well for you. You're going to get stuck. The type of erasers that I like to use. The type of erasers that I use are the Staedtler Mars plastic. And this is any latex, any white latex eraser should do the trick, but this is the one that I've been using. And a kneaded eraser. And so I can pinch this and I can shape it in order to get it into wherever I need to erase. I also have with me some pens. I'll go through some of the pens that I use. Some of these pens, you can see here, I've got a brush pen. Now this does not have a felt tip. This actually has a tip that is made of hairs. And Pentel makes this pen. It's a little difficult to locate, but certainly it's something that is worth picking up. It's called a Pentel color brush. Also use some different fine point pens, and you'll have to test which pen ink is going to best work for you, because sometimes you draw with an ink that stays active when you put the markers on top. Fortunately, this is one that I have been drawing with, and this is the Uniball Signo, and this one doesn't lift up when I run over it with marker. And you can see I'm just about out of ink. I'm going to need to replace that. I also like drawing with these Faber-Castell brushes. You know, if I want to do black or something like that, I use this to brush on my work, and it does a terrific job. And again, it doesn't pick up when I go over it with marker. I like to work clean, so I work from light to dark. So I always try to start with the colors that I think are probably going to be most sensitive, and then work my way to a darker color. Also, I have a couple other things, a little bit of whiteout. And so I have a whiteout pen, just in case I need a whiteout pen. I have a white gel pen, not as thorough as the whiteout, but when I need a light touch of something, certainly that comes in handy. I also have just something I tossed in there. It's a metallic blue. I probably haven't used it that much, but it's always good to just experiment, just to have different things in your bag that you can try. Let's see what else I've got. I've got a brush pen. Got a brush pen that I've been using, and this one here is a Tombow Art. I love the Tombow. I love to figure draw with these because they have such a wonderful point, but this one is not partially dry in the way I like to draw with my figure drawing. This one is very saturated, so this is what I'm using as my red. And I also have a white color pencil. I don't use this one also very often, but every now and then I find myself using it. And I also have a thin mechanical pencil, because when you're out in the field, you don't want to do a lot of sharpening. So I simply just click, and I've got my point. When I want to protect it, I simply just push it back in. And I've got this one. You can see, I mean, all my equipment is really well worn. I've lost the clip on the back. It's broken. The little stopper that goes into the back is also missing. And I think that's part of the problem, is that when you have a mobile studio, is that you sometimes will lose things. So things just simply disappear. They end up underneath a plate or something, or they fall to the floor and you simply just don't see it. There's another gadget I picked up. I wish I remembered who the maker was. I'm sure you could find it out there. The name has been completely scuffed off. But it also came with another stopper in the back that came with an eraser. Well, that piece is long since gone, and I have replaced it with a different eraser. And you can see here it's a pencil sharpener. So you take your pencil, you get a pencil here, and you simply sharpen your pencil, and it stays in here. You don't have to worry about that. You're on the go, and it comes with your eraser that you can use. And again, this is just a regular white latex eraser. Probably wondering what this contraption is. This is actually a pencil with a pencil extender. So there's the actual red, it's probably a vermilion or something, pencil. And this little adapter here allows me to continue to use it long after it's worn out its usefulness. But I like to just keep going with my equipment, and sort of, you know, you're like a commando. You're dropped into a situation, you just like to use what works, and you get comfortable with what works. You create a system. And this is my system. This is my bag. This is what I use in order to get my work done. Hope you find it helpful. And this is my sketchbook. One of the things I found years ago was a little trick that a friend of mine taught me, which is Don Carson. And Don Carson would work on this wonderful butcher paper type surface. And what it did was, I found that it was very beneficial to sketching outdoors. One of the problems you always run into when you're sketching outdoors is that the paper is so white that it becomes blinding. So I do have regular white sketchbooks, but the sketchbook that I usually take out to draw outside, I usually have it with a tan surface, for just that reason, that I don't want to run into the problem of being blinded by the white of the paper. Anyway, just thought I'd go ahead and flip through my sketchbook and show everyone just a glimpse of what it is that I've got. Now, I just completed this sketchbook, and I thought I would take the opportunity to just show everyone some of the sketches that I've been doing. Now, sometimes a placement, you know, the people aren't together at that particular moment, and sometimes they are. Sometimes I draw them in sets, but other times I just sort of collect them. I'm almost like in the way that a person collects butterflies, and I like to collect sketches, and it's almost like I'm collecting people. I love people watching. They're so dynamic and they're so interesting. And I love just the absolute endless variety, the endless array of different types of people, different personalities. And some people, they really do wear their experiences in their clothing and on their faces and the way they carry their body. And I love to read into that and capture them in my sketchbook. It's one of those things, you know, I try to make sure that I get out and draw, and I get out and draw often. It's something that I've been doing for probably over a decade now. I mean, it's something I always enjoyed doing, was going out and drawing, but making caricatures was something that I really enjoyed when I was in art school. And I had a period where I had simply fallen away from that, and I concentrated mainly on figure drawing and things like that. And it was just sort of wonderful to rediscover that appreciation and that love for caricature and characters. Well, the irony here is I actually started out working in the business as a character designer, but over the years, the studios have been taking advantage of the fact that I can work at multiple different levels of a project. So doing color, doing characters, doing background designs, doing background styling. And so I'm usually front-ended on a project, helping to create the particular style of a project, and also helping to create the look of a project, more so than just being specific to being a character designer. So in a sense, I'm still doing character design, but it's at the early visual development phase of a project, and because of that, it's not specific to just character design. And I have to admit that I really do like that. I like being able to do a little bit of everything. Doing some character design, doing some background styling, and just doing that exploration and the research that usually goes in at the beginning of a project. It's funny because somebody had asked me, they said, well, actually, it's a question I get a lot, and they say, well, what do you like better? Do you like working in visual development? Do you like working in production? And my answer to their question surprises them, because I think that they expect that most of the fun is had in pre-production, when the sky's the limit and people are just doing, inventing the look of a project or trying to create that. And whereas that's fun, it's a very fun process to have, but it's simply a step or a stage in that process, because when you do that for too long, then to a certain extent it becomes frustrating, because you want to be able to make decisions. You want to make decisions about the projects that you're working on. So the fact that I'm able to work in visual development and then bounce back and do production, so follow a project all the way through, is something that I really find rewarding, more so than just being stuck in one particular discipline. It's something that I think it feeds me a little better as an artist, the fact that I have an ability to go back and forth between the different disciplines. So whereas you lose a little bit of that freedom, you lose a little bit of that liberty when you're doing production work, but you're making decisions, you're making definite decisions about something. And whereas when you're doing a lot of design, a lot of design is very exciting and wonderful and challenging in its own right, I think that sometimes it does lack decision, because you're never making any one decision that that will make it directly to the screen. But production does have that sort of satisfying quality, that very satisfying aspect to it. So you can see here just a wide array of characters. Sometimes I like to just contrast characters. Not only do I create contrast with my characters, but sometimes I create contrasts with the characters on the page, one to another. So in this case here, this gentleman who is very proper with his tie and his dress shirt versus someone who's more asocial. And I love that irony. I love that, juxtaposing those two separate types of people. And other times it just becomes studies in individual bits of design, and others are simply just, they're sketches that were started, and the momentum was lost, and I didn't finish it. I didn't finish the sketch. What I really like about drawing out on the street and watching people walk by and essentially making a quick assessment of who they are, what their story is, and drawing that, is that it really does allow me to people watch, and watch the different fashions, and watch different styles as they come and go. And one of the things I really enjoy seeing are the different styles of the way people walk. Not only just the fashion style, but also people, when they walk, they have a particular look to them. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, that's the thing about when we walk, that nobody really teaches us to walk, because we learn it at such an early age. So sometimes some of the mistakes that we have in our posture, they're things that we carry with us for the rest of our lives. And then also some people start to struggle with their proportions. and they have to learn to deal and cope with their body and their body's weight distribution. So they learn to walk in a different direct or a different posture. So the posture begins to change. You can see some of the things I'm doing. I'm experimenting with. Some have lines, some don't have lines, some don't have rendering. It's just all in a process of just trying to discover different things about myself as I try to explore the world around me. And also, I think I like to create things that have a light sensibility to them. I notice that about the things that I'm interested in. I want to see the world in a very lighthearted way. I don't want to see the world in a very negative way. So my drawings try to reflect just that. They try to reflect sort of a likeness that I try to make sure that is evident in my work. I think that, as artists, that we're hired not only for our ability to create work, but also for our sensibilities, for the type of sensibilities that we have as people. So when, almost like an actor, you'll have a particular actor is cast in a particular style of role. Some might be a heavy, some might be a heartthrob. And it's because they give off a particular vibe. And I think as artists we do exactly the same thing. We put out a vibe about ourselves, about our work. And I certainly am sensitive to that, and I want to cultivate that aspect about my work, that it's probably more lighthearted than anything else. I know that I purposely do not want to do anything that's dark. I'm always looking for the lighter side of the aspects of people and their personalities. And that's something I think I really delight in quite a bit. And sometimes just, to some extent, it's funny because on this particular day we were doing mean day, so we were trying to be as mean as we could, but you can see that even in a very mean drawing, the drawings don't really turn out that mean. There's a sort of a spirit of playfulness that is something that I'm trying to cultivate, as well as cultivate my style, my technique, work on my drafting skills. So it's not just a one-sided deal. It really is a multifaceted process that as we learn to develop as artists, as we develop our talents, that we're developing multifaceted aspects of ourselves, not only in our skills, but also in our person. So you can see here again, I found myself drawing couples a lot, this hippie type, and I was contrasting it with what looked like some sort of a party girl. Or here, the interaction between two separate people. And here are two guys with the same sunglasses, what their reaction is to one another. Also individual things like bits of extreme proportion and shape language. And right down to storytelling with this little dog who is completely unaware that his world is going to change once the baby arrives. Anyway, that's it. It's another sketchbook that I've completed, and I hope that you have enjoyed seeing the sketchbook. Thank you very much.